Ma'am, I think your friend's buried you too deep in the sand. Ma'am? Ma'am? I think she's gone, guys.
I apologize for squinting so much. I'm looking directly into the sunlight. Well, not directly. The sun is actually like above us, but it's very bright out. Like the ocean and the beach and all that other stuff. I'm at the beach. I thought since, unless I've terribly miscounted, this is Hanging with Janky episode 75, that it would be special to do something a little special with it. And since I'm on vacation at the beach, I'm just like, yo, let's have a beach episode, right? Because that sounds awesome. Anyway, I have all my gaming news notes for today written on this coffee holder. So I'm going to get started with gaming news. Because let's talk about everything that's been going on in gaming news this week. There's been a lot. Starting off, we'll talk about Humble Bundle, who has reached $100 million in charitable donations. So, I don't know if I've talked about this before. I probably have. I think even last week I talked about it. But I absolutely love Humble Bundle. They're super cool. They're a website that sells games, but they sell them in bundles and usually at reduced costs. And part of those proceeds benefit charities. And sometimes the bundles are sponsored by specific charities, and sometimes they're not, and the money just gets donated to Humble Bundle's charity of choice. I don't know if they have like a standing charity that they donate to, but they're a really awesome website. They've been around for years, really, and I kind of knew about them, but I started buying from them more often recently. They're just really cool, and a lot of the games they sell are maybe like a couple years old, maybe like a year or two old. There is one they released. It was like well-reviewed games was the bundle, and there's one in there, Shadow of War, Mordor Shadow of War. So I don't think that one's released yet, but sometimes they have some good stuff in the bundles, but mostly it's just like an awesome way to get games that you're kind of like, oh, I always want to try that game, but I didn't want to spend the money on it. But now it's in a bundle, and now I can donate to charity too, and I feel good about it. So good on Humble Bundle for raising $100 million in charity over the course of their existence, and here's to another $100 million. It's really sad because I don't have an actual coffee cup today. I'm just drinking out of one of the paper cups that we got from Walmart when we got here. But over the course of vacation, I've bought like 3 more mugs, so at least I'll have new mugs to have when I get home. Next up, let's talk about the Fortnite Crossplay incident, because this is hilarious. So Fortnite, it's a really popular game that I haven't played, but you can get it on Xbox One, and you can get it on PlayStation 4. And of course, the Xbox One players can play with each other, and the PlayStation players can play with each other. But this past week, the Xbox and PlayStation players could play together. So apparently someone on the development team accidentally flipped a switch that let Xbox One players play with PlayStation 4 players. And they could tell because of the user tag. So it's like, I can't remember which, but one of them doesn't allow spaces, and they're like, hey, I think we're playing with Xbox players. And then the Xbox people were like, I think we're playing with PlayStation players. And then people started posting like screenshots, and then there was one picture, it was like a dad and his son, and one was playing on Xbox and one was playing on PlayStation, but they were playing together on the screen. So basically, for a very brief time, like an evening, for like 4 hours or so, Xbox players and PlayStation players could play together. And then it got turned off. When asked for comment, the head of Xbox was totally like, yo, I would love to see this left on. I would love for players to be able to play together. Whereas PlayStation, when asked for comment, Sony was like, we're just not sure if Xbox can ensure the safety of our players online, which caused no end of consternation to the head of Xbox. On a related note to this, though, Minecraft has released their Better Together update, which allows crossplay against PC, iPhones, Androids, and Xboxes, which is super cool. So they've changed it because, originally, like, the iPhone version, it was Minecraft Pocket Edition, and I think the Android one was called that too, or maybe it was called Android Edition, or whatever, and what have you. Now they're all just called Minecraft, because they can all play together. So, Xbox, PC, iPhone, Android, they're all just called Minecraft now, because all those players can play together. And Nintendo is in talks with Microsoft about it, because they want to be part of the Better Together Update 2 with the Switch. They haven't yet, because there are still some kinks that they need to work out to get to be able to let the players play together online. But eventually, the Switch will be joining Better Together Online. But for now, it's still just the Switch edition. But they'll be on soon. It hasn't been stated yet if the 3DS version will be part of Better Together. I think maybe they might wait to see how Switch goes before they include the 3DS. But for now, it looks like it'll just be the 3DS edition. In fact, I don't know if that one's released yet or not. So I don't know. We'll see how that one turns out in the future. And then PlayStation has held out. So here's the thing. Even after like everything I just said about like the comments that Sony made during Fortnite and whatever, the head of, who was it? I believe it's the vice president of the gaming division of Microsoft has said that they are in fact in talks with PlayStation for creating crossplay, at least for Minecraft, but maybe for other games too. Despite the comments between Sony and the consternation it caused the Xbox team to say that they can't ensure the safety of their players, they are talking to each other about finally establishing some sort of crossplay so all those players could play together. Anyway, I think that the whole thing is interesting because here's my opinion. I think if Sony continues to hold out, that's just going to hurt them in the long run, because if everyone else, if Nintendo and Xbox and PC and all of them start supporting this crossplay, and Sony doesn't hop on board, then I think that's going to hurt them, because people are going to look at that and say, well, why would I want to get a PlayStation if I can get an Xbox or even a Switch and be able to play with a much larger online community? And I understand Sony being hesitant because right now this whole idea of crossplay is kind of in Microsoft's court. I think that they were kind of the driving force behind it, especially between Xbox and PC, which is one of the things that they really pushed with the Better Together update a couple years back whenever they showed it at E3. But I get that it's kind of in Microsoft's court right now, and they're kind of like the driving force behind it. But if you hop on board, then maybe you can find a way to work together, and maybe they can find a way to sort of make it theirs as well, so that they don't feel like they're giving up that as much control, maybe. Anyway, I just think it's interesting, and we'll just kind of see how it plays out. But yeah, if you're a Minecraft fan, you can play together with a whole bunch of other people, and that's pretty cool. Next up, let's talk about Marvel vs. Capcom Deluxe Edition, which was supposed to include some really kick-ass Infinity Stones. Okay, so Marvel vs. Capcom released, which is, I should say, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite released, which is the new one. People like it, but they also kind of think that it's a little cheap. That's the general gist I get from hearing people, is that at its base it's a really good fighting game, and the mechanics are really great, but stylistically it could look a lot better than it does. For example, the meme that is Chun-Li's face that circulated the internet, I'm sure I can find a picture of it somewhere, that circulated the internet for a while after the first trailer dropped. And in fitting style, the Infinity Stones that were supposed to come with the Deluxe Edition are pretty lackluster themselves. So basically, what they were supposed to be were these, like, I can't remember if it was glass or like an acrylic, but these really awesome stones
that had like LED lighting coming up from underneath of them, and they were in this glowing box, and it looked really cool. And they were Infinity Stones, and they were awesome. And then people posted some pictures of the Infinity Stones they got, which just looked like pastel-colored Easter eggs in a box. If you got the deluxe edition of Marvel vs. Capcom, I'm sorry that the Infinity Stones didn't end up as cool as you hoped. Okay, so next let's talk about Steam, as I seem to be doing once a week, every week these days. But they recently implemented graphs to help people determine whether they want to get a game or not, and sort of combat review bombing. So I'm sure you guys know about review bombing, which is this new concept that's kind of come about where if people disagree with the developer for one reason or another, either a developer's social stance or like they're mad at the developer for not doing something in particular, they decide to review bomb their games. There have been 3 high-profile cases that people have noticed. Really, the only 3 cases that I know of review bombing. People did the same thing, a similar thing to Valve, because the writer behind Half-Life released what was essentially going to be the plot for Half-Life 2 Episode 3, and people were just upset that they would never see an Episode 3 or Half-Life 3, so they review bombed Dota 2, which they felt that Valve was spending far too much time on and not making these like games that had really great narratives that they just don't spend time on anymore. And that one I don't think was as effective. I think it mostly stayed positive. Maybe it dropped a mix, but whatever. And then recently this thing with Firewatch and Campo Santo and DMCAing PewDiePie, which is a whole other thing that I'm not going to get into because that's another, 20 minutes to an hour of discussion. But basically, it's the idea that consumers will review poorly on a game that doesn't really... it's not necessarily about the game that they're trying to review that gets bombed. So Steam's way of combating this is to introduce a new graph feature, which basically shows reviews over time, and if a large amount of negative reviews gets received all at once, you can see that on this graph, and then consumers can sort of make their judgment based on, I guess whether or not they agree with the reasoning behind the review bombing or whatever. And people have kind of had mixed reactions to it. I've seen some articles that were like, Steam's solution to everything is more data, and really what they need is moderation. And that review bombers will kind of like look at this graph as sort of like a badge of honor thing, like they do whenever people block them on Twitter or whatever. And then on the other hand, people are like, yeah, this is a good idea. It could maybe use some improvements, but it's always nice for the consumer to have more data to work from. Those are people like Total Biscuit, who he's like the biggest PC reviewer on YouTube and on Steam. And, his thing is data. That's how he runs his business. And he does run his YouTube channel like a business, which is a very smart way to go. So, I personally, I'm kind of in the middle on things. I think that the graph is nice. I agree with TB in that it should be showing all the time, because right now you have to actually click on it to see it, which is purposeless to me. But I also do think that if a review has absolutely nothing to do with the game, then there should be some level of moderation on Steam to remove that review if it literally has nothing whatsoever to actually do with the game, because that's not useful to the people who are actually trying to figure out if they want the game or not. But the thing is, like, review bombing, it's shown that it doesn't really affect sales of a game. So it's kind of like a moot point anyway. But I don't know. It's just one of those things to talk about, and I could talk about it a lot. I was actually talking with myself about it down on the beach, trying to determine what exactly my opinion was of this whole histograph and review bombing in general and all that. So I could have like an hour-long discussion with you about my thoughts on it, but I'm going to leave it there. But yeah, so I think Steam is trying their best. I think that a site like Steam, it's very hard to get the level of moderation that they would need to make moderation work. So I think at least they're trying with data. And it does put it more on the customers and the gamers who are using the site, but I think that for now it's probably the best way for them to go, because it's a very big site, and it's just easier to ask the customer to put in a little more effort. than to try to keep everything in moderation, because that would be insane for them. And that's sort of my opinion. But I would love to hear yours if you'd like to leave it below. But yeah, that's what's going on with Steam these days. And wrapping out news for the week, let's talk about the Tomb Raider trailer that dropped. So, new Tomb Raider movie, they're working on it. They dropped a trailer for it. It kind of follows the adventures of young Lara Croft. It's styled after the Tomb Raider reboot they did not that long ago with Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider. I watched the trailer. It looks pretty hype. It definitely reminds me of the newer Tomb Raider games. The only thing is, like, it it kind of seems like it has the same plot, like the same basic plot points as the Tomb Raider movie with Angelina Jolie, and also the Tomb Raider Legend trilogy, which is like, she finds out that her dad, who was also an archaeologist, has some unfinished business that she's determined to finish, which is like how Tomb Raider always goes. So I don't see it having like an amazing plot to it, but it looks like it'll be super actiony, which is cool. But that being said, I actually kind of really love the original Tomb Raider movies, even though they were cheesy and campy and kind of crappy. They made me laugh. So I'll probably enjoy this one too, and I'll probably go and check it out. I don't know if it will be like a huge success among gamers, because, you know, gamer movies don't tend to turn out like great. They kind of deviate pretty wildly from the source material. But, you know, it'll probably be a commercial success because people will be like, ooh, Tomb Raider, and that's new and fun. So that's kind of my opinion. But definitely go check out the trailer because it's super cool. And yeah, that's what I got going. And that's all I have this week for gaming news. I don't have my new subs to thank with me because I don't have my computer to pull those up. But of course, thank you. Thank you to all members of the Jank Squad. You all are lovely. I hope you have a lovely week. I hope you have a lovely week next week. I love you all. And that was all I have this week, so I hope you guys enjoyed yet another episode of Hanging with Janky. If you did, feel free to leave those likes down below. Comments, positive, negative. Feel free to leave those below as well. One night thing, I hope you have a lovely day, evening, or whenever you're watching. Thank you so much for watching. I'm running out of time, so that's why I'm talking really fast. But until the next time, this is Janky Shenanigans, signing out.